Right. Hello. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and welcome to another of our Niagara 4.12 feature preview Tridium talks. This time we'll be focusing on the HTTP client driver. I'm Jacqueline Walpole, one of the product managers here at Tridium, and I'm joined today by Curtis McCurley, who's an application engineer in our EMEA office. You might notice this is a particularly European edition of the Tridium talk, and that's primarily because this particular feature we're talking about today was developed by the technical team in our UK Centre of Excellence here. So I'm going to start out with a few ground rules. I'm going to briefly run through what's new with Niagara and where we are with version releases. Then I'm going to introduce the HTTP client driver and why we've created it. Curtis will take over explaining the technical side of things and run through some demonstrations of different use cases. And to finish up, I'll provide a couple of reminders of where to find the information that you might need when working with Niagara. And I'll explain where you can find a recording of this session and watch it again at your leisure. If you have any questions you wish to ask, pop them in the Q&A section and we'll review these and answer as many as possible at the end of the session. Don't worry if we don't get a chance to address your question. If we have your contact details registered, we'll get back in touch with you. And all of the questions will be compiled into a Q&A document that will be made available with the recording on the Tridium website. Okay, so what's new with Niagara? Well, starting out with our long-term support release of Niagara 4.10. This was released in March 2021. And this is one of those versions that we endeavor to continue to update this alongside our new feature releases. If you want a static feature set, but still want to make the most of the latest patches and fixes, then 4.10 can provide this for you. We pick up the latest quarterly updates of Java 8 and we combine with the latest third-party libraries and security updates, plus all the suitable defect fixes, and wrap them together into an update release. This is much easier to deploy to your custom sites than managing individual patches. But our current release version that we have at the moment is Niagara 4.11. This was released back in December 2021 and has a number of useful new features over and above 4.10. These include a preview of the web wiresheet, BACnet Secure Connect, TLS 1.3 support, plus there's History Alarm Archive Provider to streamline pulling data you've archived in a relational database back into your station so you can use it in web charts and other components. So it's well worth downloading and getting familiar with all the features that are in 4.11 already. At this moment in time, we are in our beta testing phase with 4.12. This is a vitally important stage in our product release cycle. And those who take part in this really assist our entire community. It really helps us to flesh out the stability of a build. It's not too late to join. So if you have a live site and you're willing to put a feature from 4.12 through its paces in the real world, you can still sign up to take part in the beta program. So just contact the email address that's on your screen now, tridiumbetatest@tridium.com, to get access to that. We're working away during this beta phase, and we're targeting August at this point for the Niagara 4.12 release. So talking of the features, the new features that are in 4.12, we've continued to build on Niagara's key tenets of visualization, connectivity from edge to cloud, security, rapid deployment techniques, certification, and IT compliance. Under visualization, you should have already seen the Tridium talk on the web wiresheet. If you haven't already, it's available, as I say, along with the other Tridium talks through tridium.com. Of course, we're bringing all of the different views that we have in our workbench and updating them into HTML5 views. And so the web wiresheet is a really useful way of using the wiresheet through an HTML5 interface. We're also modernizing the Niagara Point Manager view and the BQ Query Builder, and we have HTML5 versions of both of those. For connectivity, we've taken our MQTT transport mechanism, and we've now added Azure authentication to the mix. We already have AWS and Google Cloud platforms, and we now cover out the big 3 cloud providers for connectivity for that. We've also added in MSTP processing improvements, where we've transferred this to the coprocessor to improve performance, especially for BACnet MSTP. And I hear that we've been having some really good feedback already from our beta sites on the performance improvements that are being achieved. We've also added in Max Pro support in the video framework. I think you should be aware that originally our video drivers were only available through our enterprise security application, but we've brought those into and made them available in the standard framework, separate to using the enterprise security application, because there are so many new solutions that video it can be useful for, that we're certainly keen on improving this and extending our support. Obviously, as far as security is concerned, we continue to bring you the latest critical support updates and enhancements. Third-party libraries such as our Java updates and JX Browser and others all go into each edition that we bring out. And in here also we have defects, fixes, and anything else that we need to ensure that we cover out. As far as speeding up deployment of Niagara, one of the things here, which is actually really vital to the EMEA region that I'm in at the moment, and that is internationalization support. Those of you who aren't so aware of using Niagara in a multilingual environment is the fact that different languages are supported using our lexicon tools. And that's a tool that allows you to translate all of the labels in Niagara into different languages. But Niagara and the many modules that make it up is such a complex structure that identifying where new labels have been added in from one version to the next, or changed or altered, is a real challenge for those who are trying to translate into French, Spanish, Italian, etc. And so it's really useful that this time round we've managed to provide an easier means to identify all changes to lexicons in the latest updates. We've also done some Edge tools updates, and this is primarily focusing around expanding our provisioning enhancements. And we've included license updates that can be remotely pushed through to different connected Niagara devices. As far as certificate and compliance are concerned, we've expanded the history character limitation, and something that's really simple. But just simply taking it from the traditional 44 character limitation that we had that was causing real problems for certain people, especially on larger systems that had quite a hierarchy of different devices and folders. We certainly had some issues there. So we've expanded that up to over 200 characters now, and that should take away some of those problems. And it's small things like these that are quick wins that certainly we always want and value feedback to the Tridium team as far as product change requests are concerned. And they will always be considered, because we certainly want to try and make sure that we make Niagara workable for you. So last thing on this list is the BACnet Protocol Revision 15 update. Although we're not actively engaged right now in resubmitting our devices for BTL testing, but for our portability partners, if you wish to submit your portability devices, 4.12 would be the next one to aim for. So we're here today to talk about the HTTP client driver primarily. And so what is it and why should I use it? I would like to say that when I first joined Tridium from the world of facility management software, my goal was to gain access to the most valuable system in a smart building, the BMS and controls. CAFM, integrated workplace management systems, resource and work order management systems, all use web service APIs to integrate with each other. But for safety and security reasons, proprietary BMS systems were closed and inaccessible. So facility managers started to overlay the BMS with extra superfluous sensors just to get information about how the building was performing. And still they could not enact any change into the way that HVAC or other systems operated. At best, they could only automate the raising of a work order to get an engineer to make a change to set points in the BMS supervisor. But now all of that's changed. With the HTTP client driver, it allows Niagara stations to easily interact with HTTP web services and REST APIs for data exchange both in and out of the Niagara framework. This can truly expand the possibilities of what we can do with system solutions, and is really limited primarily by your imagination. You can unlock the power of a wealth of internet accessible systems whilst maintaining the security and protection of your Niagara framework. You can drive decision-making, injecting powerful data into your logic. I mean, one small example is there are some amazing cloud-hosted resources providing equipment performance signatures that can help drive edge analytics and predictive maintenance. And Curtis will show you some simple but powerful examples of bringing live data from a weather station or displaying live flight information in your Niagara system. He's also going to use Grafana to jazz up your graphics. Bearing in mind all the social media platforms and ERP and integration platforms such as Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, and Teams all have well-documented APIs. How you use Niagara data to enact changes within your building and notify the occupants and represent the information is limited only by your imagination. So, just wanted to cover out a couple of things on the terminology that we're covering here. Obviously, HTTP is the protocol by which web pages are retrieved in web browsers, sorry. And this allows data to be exchanged both in and out the Niagara station. Web services are online services, and they often use JSON or XML format using HTTP as the protocol. So APIs are the defined definitions, one might say, of what operations available. It's got the whole definition of how the data needs to be formatted for the exchange and what parameters can be used. RESTful web services and APIs are a particular subset which obey a common set of rules and constraints. And the most common functions that we use with those are get, put, post, and delete. And all of these are available through the HTTP client driver. So what do you get? You get the client driver and a standalone HTTP client. The standalone HTTP client is like using Postman to make an individual connection and request, whereas the client driver allows you to manage several endpoints as components with configurable proxy extensions. So you get a whole lot of things. I have to admit we have to add in delete into this list too, I think. You do get HTTPS support, so why we call it HTTP client driver. It does cover the secure socket layer as well. We have configurable headers, configurable parameters, and use all those tools, timeouts, redirects, etc. We use a number of standard authenticators as well. And we built in some tools like auto headers, client multi-add utilities, and client folders to help with efficiency. And of course, it's integrated into Niagara certificate management for security and can feed through, so we have security dashboard cards showing up too. And of course, the European team brought you the JSON toolkit. And this is a particularly useful tool to be able to help feed the main payload of what you want to use when communicating to APIs. One last thing from me, and that's covering out the licensing for this. So the HTTP client driver, how many times did I say that, is included in the 4.12 core build. It's free to evaluate in your demo licenses, but requires an add-on to license in your station. So if you are using it in a live building, you'll need to purchase the DR HTTP for an embedded controller, such as a JACE or portability device, or DRS HTTP for a supervisor. It does require active SMA, and this is something that is really key. You'll notice that a lot of our cloud connectivity tools, things like the JSON Toolkit and some of our other tools, all will check for active SMA. And the main reason we do that is because we are opening your systems, to connect to the internet, to connect to the World Wide Web. And it's really important that you should make sure that your Niagara is up to the latest version possible, because we can only ask you to, purchase SMA. We can make it possible for you to be able to do that. And that's the best way that you can secure your system, is to always be on the latest version you can. And I say latest version, or the latest update version of a long-term support build. Now, the HTTP client consumes global points, but you will find that it's only per endpoint that you are actually connecting to. And you may well find, and I think some examples that Curtis has to show you later will show that, a single endpoint can actually provide you back with 1, 10, or 100 pieces of useful data. Similarly, when sending information out, particularly if using the JSON Toolkit, you can actually wrap up a lot of information into one single message. So the usual message here is contact your Tridium salesperson for pricing. So now for the science bit, I'm going to hand over to Curtis McCurley to take you through how to use it.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for that. Okay, so I'm going to look at 3 separate different ways to utilize this driver. The first example will be using the client component to connect to a weather station. The second one will be using the driver side of things when it comes to the HTTP driver. And then the last one will be taking allowing a third party to grab data from the station and use it externally, which is the Grafana bit, which Jacqueline was talking about earlier. So the weather station. So we have got this actual weather station bolted to our Coolum office here in the UK. The bit on the right is a wind direction and speed sensor. Obviously, we've got the rain sensor next to that, and then we've got an outside sensor, the second from the left. And then the one bit on the left is the indoor bit, which is our IoT hub. So how does that all work together? So we've got our outside data. So we've got wind, rain, temperature, humidity outside, which then connects wirelessly on a proprietary network to the IoT hub, which has also got some sensor inside it as well, which obviously connects to the Wi-Fi router, which then sends that data up to the cloud. And then this is the bit that we're interested today. We're then going to take that data from the cloud and we're going to present that back to our N4 station. Okay, so this is the big thing when it comes to HTTP driver, and most commonly with APIs as well. Without the documentation, it is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to actually understand and get the data back. So in this case, I've had to register the device online, and I've had to actually put my username and credentials in there. And as you can see from this web page that I've taken a snapshot of, when I'm asking for authorization, in this case, I have to present it with some information to get that data back. So starting from the top of the page, I've got my URL, which is my https://apinetimo.com OAuth2 token. The method in this case is post. So if you go back to what Jacqueline was saying earlier, get, post, put, and delete, we use a post method in this case. We also have to present some entry parameters as well. And we've got a lot of these would be actually given to you when you register your application online. And then at the bottom there, we've got our return parameters, and this is the data that comes back and gives us the information that we require. In this case, for this call here, we will get 3 bits of information back, an access token, an expire in, and also a refresh token as well, which we can use later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all that information and I'm going to copy that into a notepad. I'm going to copy that to my clipboard for the use when I go into my station in a moment. Okay, so we've also got a second part of the authorization as well. So as you probably see from the URL there, it's an OAuth2 type authorization. So in this case, we have to send an initial call to get the access token back, which will give us a refresh token. We then have to represent the refresh token within a 3-hour mark to actually keep that access token alive. Okay, so what does that look like? So I'm going to take a HTTP client from our palette. I'm going to drop that on the page. So if I go into there, you can see we've got our slot sheet on our parameters. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to post. So I'm just going to expand these out because there's a nice little trick that we've added into the tool here. So from where I've copied on the into my clipboard, I can paste that into the populate from URL box that pops up. And as you can see, it automatically fills in the slots for me and creates those slots for me, as you can see. Okay, so one thing that hasn't gone in there is the password. That's because I want to keep the password secure by using the bog file security. So I've created a parameter token auth on the authenticator type, and I'm going to present that. It'll make more sense when I get to the end of this section of the demonstration. I'll show you and I'll go through the summary. Okay, so I've got all my parameters in there. If I go to the top, click action and click send, this could be connected to an interval component from the kit control palette if need. Bring on pause, there we go. We've now got data coming back as a JSON format. So there's my access code and there's my refresh token there as well. Okay, so let's in effect decrypt that JSON. So we're going to go into there and go to the JSON toolkit. I'm going to use a JSON path. I could use a JSON demux router, but in this case, I'm going to use a JSON path. I'm going to use 2, one for the access token and one for the refresh token. So I'm just going to put in the path access token because that's the bit of information I want. I'm going to duplicate that and then add the refresh token in there as well. Okay, let's connect those two together. Clear that and resend it again so we get our data coming through. There we go. So now I've got my decrypted information. Okay, so next thing we're going to do, we need to set up for our refresh token. So now I'm going to go back to my HTTP client palette and I'm going to put another HTTP client on the page. I've sneakily gone away and copied and pasted from my clipboards the URL with the parameters. I'm going to paste those into my address bar again. Now, as you can see. Now, you've probably noticed that I've got one bit missing there. I don't actually have the refresh underscore token as a parameter. So what I can do is I'm going to add it manually by just right-clicking on parameters, and go in actions, and then add. Okay, as you can see, I've now got a blank refresh token slot there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to my wiresheet and I'm going to use the composite tool to actually expose that slot. So what I can do then is I can take the out slot from the JSON path for the refresh token and feed it directly in. So if the refresh token does change for some reason, maybe we forget to refresh it for 3 hours or we get a power outage for more than 3 hours, it will automatically keep us updated. So it now gives us the information back again. Gives us the same information, but we just need to make sure we do this just to keep the access code active. Okay, so we've now got authorization set up for this weather station. Okay, so moving on to the next one. So just give a bit of a summary of what we've actually achieved there. So on the left-hand side, as you can see, is the snapshot from the website, and on the right-hand side is our snapshot from the property sheet. So obviously HTTPS and the URL there relates to the address on the right-hand side. So the mode is secure, which is HTTPS. You can have insecure if you wish. The host address, the port number, which is typically 443, but obviously we give you the option to change it. And then we then got the path, which is the end part of the URL. Okay, so the method is post, which is from that drop down there. As we said earlier, you've got get, post, put, and delete. We've also got the entry parameters there, which correspond to the parameters here. Now, one thing that is missing is the user password. As I said earlier, I want to keep the password encrypted to protect it from people going in there and taking my password away. So what we've done is I've added this authenticator using the parameter token auth to make sure that it's encrypted within the bulk file itself. So I've added the parameter name password with the password, which is obviously starred out. Now, I could, if I'm not worried about my password, include that parameter in the parameters section above if required. Okay, so we've done all the authorization. Let's start getting some data. So in this case, in the top left-hand corner of this page, it says get, and it says get station data. So that's the URL that we want to use. So what does that look like in Niagara? So again, we're going to drag the HTTP client onto the page. And again, I've been sneaky and copied the URL from my notepad. And this time I've been even more sneaky. And at the end there, you see that I've put access token equals and left it blank. So what that's going to do is that's going to create me a blank parameter there. So I can now go back into the wire sheet and go to composite and then connect that to the out slot from the first JSON path. Okay, so I've now got that there. What I'm going to do is I've got a palette which I've set up some JSON components which are going to help me complete this demo quicker than I would do if I did it manually. So first thing I do is going to go into each one of these JSON paths and have a look at each one. Keep a note of these names that you see here. So we've got body, device, dashboard data, and we've got modules there as another word. I'll come back to that in a moment on the next slide, but just to keep, I'll show you where that comes up in a moment. So let's link those together. Okay, so as you can see, the demux routers are in learn at the moment. So as soon as I hit send, bosh, there we go. We've got 33 bits of information coming back from this device. So going back to the using global points, we've used 3 global points for this example. And so 2 for authorization and 1 for the station data, which returns 33 points of data. Okay, so I've taken the output slot from our HTTP. I've gone onto this website, which will make the JSON string a lot more readable. So if we have a look at it now, so it just converts it for us. So as you can see from the stream there, we've got body, devices, and as we go down the list, you can see dashboard data, and we can see the word modules and stuff like that. So you can see how the JSON toolkit operates. For more information on the JSON toolkit stuff, just have a look at documentation. It's very good, so you can work out from there. Okay, that's part 1 done. Moving on to part 2. So this case, we're going to use the driver. What I'm going to do for this example is I'm going to take data from 10 British airports departure boards. So I'm going to display things like departure time, flight number, airline name, where it's going to, gate number, and probably more important, if anybody's tried to travel recently, how much it's delayed by as well. So I'm going to have a look at that one there. Okay, so I've registered on this website here, which is developer.flightstats.com. Now I've registered on there If I use too many calls, it will charge me. So just be aware of items like that. So this website's quite clever. You can go through and pick the parameters that you want to actually display on your system. And then what it would do is it would give you the request at the bottom, which you can copy and then put that into Niagara later on. That's quite a nice website. Let's say I got 1,000 calls for free. Anything more than that, you have to pay. So it's worth noting when you're doing your HTTP stuff. You don't want your customers getting a massive bill at the end of the day. And there are throttling parameters within the system to stop that happening. Okay, so let's have a look at the drivers. Now, I've been a bit forward thinking here, and I've actually already set up my HTTP client. But as you can see from the page there, it works in exactly the same way as your Modbus and your backnet stuff. So you've got a driver, you've then got a device, which you just click new at the bottom and you can configure. And then we've also got a points extension as well. So if we click a new extension, new point there, if we click on that one there, and you can see from the page there, we've got host address, port, path, method, and so on and so forth. It's all the typical things we looked at in the last example. Now, I've used one of my favorite tools is the templating tool. So I've created a template for this. So in there, in the wire sheet, I've set up all my JSON toolkit bits and pieces that I want to get the information that I require. I've also set up a bit of configuration so I can go into the Excel spreadsheet and configure it. And I've also created a graphic as well. So I don't have to draw a graphic for each one. So just to prove there's nothing in there still, let's have a look at the Excel spreadsheet that I've created from my template. So as you can see, I've got 10 airports: Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Stansted, and so on and so forth. So I've got deployed name and also display name, so it looks nice in my list. And as you can see from the URL, there's only 3 letters different on each of the URLs. So this makes it an ideal candidate for using the driver. Okay, so let's go to our template service and bulk deploy from Excel. Okay, choose my particular Excel spreadsheet, click on that. There we go, 10 devices straight away. So if I now go down to my departures board, device, and look at the points folder, as you can see, I've got all my data, and you can see I've got out slots already populated from there. So if I go into each one, because I've given it a graphic, as you can see, I've got time, flight numbers, and so on and so forth. Don't want to go to Gatwick today. So we've got Manchester, Stansted, and so on and so forth. Okay. So let's have a look at a bit of a summary on that one there. So why would we use a driver over a single component? If you've got common parameters and headers, what you can do is, in the example on the right-hand side there, you can see I've created a points folder in my file structure. And in there, I've put all my parameters that are common for all points that live under that points folder. So it uses, so as you can see there, we've got the app ID and the app key and so on and so forth. It's going to be common for each one. Or if you've got similar URLs, like the previous example that I just showed you, there's only 3 letters different for each one. You can mass deploy stuff very, very quickly. So some of the examples in this case is metering, lighting. We've got Philips Hue running here that's got lighting on there. Air quality sensors. I was talking to someone at the summit last month, no, 2 months ago now, and he was telling me that he wanted to use it on a rodeo parking lot lighting scheme. So yeah, there's so many different things you can use it for. Okay, so, and part 3 of this demonstration is the station data to third parties. So we're going to use a package called Grafana. So those that have never come across Grafana before, it's a web-based type dashboarding software, which is open source, which makes it free in most cases, which is great because I love the free bit of software. It can either run locally, so an on-prem type scenario, or you can have it running in the cloud. Obviously, the JSON needs to have access to the cloud as well. So we're going to use that to create some graphics from my outdoor temperature and humidity. So this is some data coming from my weather station here. So I've got that going to my Niagara station. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export that. No, sorry, wrong word, export. I get told off for that. I'm going to make the data available for the third party to come in and grab the data and take it away. So I'm going to create a graph that looks very similar to that in the web browser. And then as an added bonus, I'm going to take that panel, as it's called, and I'm then going to re-import that back into Niagara, just to give you a little bit more options when it comes to graphing and charting within Niagara. Okay, so first thing I need to do is I need to set up my JSON query schema. So from the example folder in the JSON toolkit, I'm going to take the query history. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my two queries. So under history query, I'm going to rename that so it makes more sense to me. I'm going to call that temp query. And then I'm going to copy my temp history from my temperature, paste that one in there. Do I have data? Yep, all good. And I'm going to duplicate that for humidity. Okay, make sure that one works as well. Okay, so I've now told the schema where to get the data from. We now need to set up the JSON schema objects. So under the history data, there's one already there ready for us to use. I'm going to rename that again so it makes more sense to me. Okay, and select my relevant query. And I'm going to duplicate that for my humidity. And then select the particular one there. Okay, so that's the humidity one. Now, if I go up to the top and click generate, this will give me my history query and my JSON schema. Okay, so one thing to note there, I've got my timestamp and I've also got my value below. However, I need to make sure that it's got the key as well as the value. So I'm going to change that from row array to object array. And when I go back and generate again, you can see now I've got a timestamp and the value as well. So that's important for when I get to the Grafana bit in a moment. So I've now created the script schema. Now going to the HTTP side, under incoming requests, I now use a component called string servlet. So I'm going to drop that onto the page, give it a name. I've copied that because I want to use it again. So inside there, now this is the important bit. So in where it says servlet name, I'm going to put in outside conditions in there. Now this forms part of the URL that Grafana is going to use to actually interact with Niagara. So the schema is actually the data for that slot is fed into that data slot there. So I'm just going to link that together. Okay, and once that's done, you can now see I've got data in there ready to be taken. Okay. Right, so now in for setup, let's move into Grafana. So I've gone onto web browser and I've got installed on my local PC, so I'm on a local host here. So I'm going to go create a new dashboard and a new panel from there. There's some sample data that comes whenever you create a new one. Now I'm going to use a plugin which comes with Grafana called Infinity. That one is specifically there for JSON feeds. So in the URL, I'm going to put local host because obviously I'm talking to a station on my PC. And if I go back to Niagara again, if you remember rightly, in the servlet name, I used outside conditions. So again, I'm going to copy that out. I'm going to paste that into my URL in here. So there we go. So the rows and the root, where does that bit information come from? Let's go back to Niagara and go to my schema. So this is the subset of information that we've got. So in this case, we've got the temp data. So that's the bit. And if you remember from when I set this bit up, I've also got hum data as well. So we need to remember that one as well when I configure the Grafana bit in a moment. So let's copy that across. Okay, so I've now told it what data to look for. I now need to tell it how to lay it out. So I've got two columns, one for time and one for the value itself. So we're going to use the key there. Copy that. Give it a friendly name and format it as timestamp. And then we then need to do the same for the value as well. So it is case sensitive, so it's a good idea, like I've done, is copy and paste it because you know it's not going to be wrong. Again, we get a friendly name. And in this case, we're going to format it as a number. There we go. So we now have got data coming through to our graph. Okay, so that's the temperature. Let's also add the humidity as well. The URL is going to be the same because we're talking to the same string servlet. But this time, the root is going to be hum data because that's the second subset of information we want. However, the columns are going to be the same. Okay, let's give it a name, save the dashboard. Okay, so we now got data. Now, magic of the internet, I've gone away and I've reconfigured my graph to make it a little bit more reader friendly. So I've put the humidity axis down the right hand side. I've also given it a refresh rate as well. Okay, so I'm now going to take that and I'm going to import that into Niagara itself. So click the outside conditions. I'm going to go to the share. So I can choose the theme. I can either have dark, light, or current. And I'm going to copy that URL that's on that pane there. Okay, so let's go back to Niagara. Create a new view. And what we're going to do is I'm going to use a web browser widget from outside, from the workbench palette. So I'm just going to put that on the page, go into it, and I'm just going to paste that URL into the board. As you can see, let's make sure I've got the right, it's pasted in properly. So the outside conditions, date, to and from, and also the right pane number. Okay, so we've got an issue here. The URL is not allowed by the workbench whitelist. So what we're going to need to do is we need to go to our system.property file. And what we need to do is we need to allow our local host in the whitelist. So I'm going to just do a Control F and then do a search for white. Okay, so I need to change line 345. So first thing I need to do is take the hash out and then just add localhost to the end of the line and save it. Okay, so that's now done. However, I need to restart my workbench. So by the power of the internet, here's one I did earlier. So I've restarted my workbench, and as you can see, it's now working on my screen. And I've now got a rather more funky graph on my PX page. And I've got full control over what data I see, the refresh rates, and so on and so forth. Okay, so normally with Grafana, a lot of people use InfluxDB as a case of getting the data into it, which obviously gives you two databases. In this case, we've only got one database, which is the Niagara database, so that works really well. So let's just have a quick look at the summary there. So this is what we achieved once we imported it in there. But what we can do is we can change the look and feel. So you can see there's another example there. I've changed the backdrop to black. Obviously, if I've got a web browser, that's going to look quite cool with the different colors. And I can also configure it to get rid of the Grafana menus and other bits and pieces from around it, so you can stop people fiddling around with it. So, and also as well, this is just the property sheet from there as well. So the important things to remember here is the servlet name, which obviously forms part of the URL, and also the data slot there. That's where the data goes into. Okay, so it's been a bit fast, but the power of YouTube, you can always come back and watch it again later and pause it and rewind and get my gabbled mess later on. So I'm going to hand back to Jacqueline now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Curtis. There is just so much information he's trying to pack into such a short period of time. I think that was brilliant. Thank you very much. I've just got a couple of slides just to finish here with, and that's about where to find Niagara resources and materials. You should all be familiar by now with our Tridium.com website. And that's your main point of contact. From here, you can actually link in to so many other sources of information about Niagara. So get the know-how when you need it. At the top there on the website, we have Niagara Community, Niagara Resource Center, and Tridium University links. So the Niagara Community, again, we've had a recent Tridium talk on some of the latest features of that. And particularly, we now have our little chatbot, our Tridium Assist, that can help you find your way through there. We've also had a refresh to the Niagara Resource Center as well, trying to provide you even easier access to a wider range of information on Niagara. And also, we do have, of course, our Tridium University. On here, make sure that you do get a login from on here, because there is quite a range these days of free of charge resources that you can actually watch and view, and start out with that getting started button, that big green button, because that's got some videos on how to find your way around the system. Certainly in the events, we have a full schedule of upcoming training programs, be them in person or in virtual, and in many different regions. So you can filter all of those down to be the right ones that you want to find. And if you're looking for the Niagara Pro Tips, this is an amazing range of short videos and YouTube videos that are provided by both James Johnson and Kevin Mamajek. And they're small snippets of, less than 10 minutes at a time that give you really useful hints and tips and small bite-sized pieces. So where can you find the recording of this and more Tridium talks? You go to the Tridium.com website, you go to Services and Support at the top right there, click on Events, and then that will take you to the events page and show upcoming events by default. If you choose past events, it will take you to the full range. I think it's around 45 in just the recent past, of Tridium talks that we have available to you. And if you click into one of these, you'll be able to watch the video back on demand. And this is also where we will, underneath the video links, will be a link to download the questions and answers. Talking of questions and answers, I'm afraid we are really quite backed up on time now, but I just wanted to, I've seen that, the lads here and across the globe have been answering the questions that have been coming in the Q&A screen. However, there was one that I saw that was pertinent to me, because one of my key focuses within the product team is licensing. And there was a question which was asking that, as it's very common to need or want to use the JSON toolkit along with the HTTP driver, is there any option for a bundle of these? I think that's a great suggestion, and I will see what I can do to put this in place, particularly for when 4.12 goes live. So that would be bundling the DR JSON with the DR HTTP for embedded devices, and the DRS JSON with the DRS HTTP for supervisors. So watch this space, and hopefully we'll be able to get that launched at the same time as the product. But otherwise, all I've got to do is right now say thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your days to come and spend this 45 minutes or so with Curtis and I. We really appreciate you joining. After this point, by all means, do reach out, get in touch with us if you have any further inquiries, suggestions that you want to follow up with after watching this. Thank you very much.